Walter White is remembered as one of TV's greatest villains. A man who transformed from mild-mannered chemistry teacher into a drug kingpin through ego and ruthlessness. But there's a story hiding underneath that transformation that almost nobody talks about. Walter White should have died in Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3, multiple times over. And the only reason he didn't, well, sometimes it was luck, and sometimes it was because of a former screw-up student who Walt spent 5 seasons manipulating, using, and destroying. Jesse Pinkman didn't just witness Walt's rise, he made it possible. Some of these might be a little bit of a reach, but stay with me. Teaching Walt the business. Walt knew the chemistry, he cooked exceptional meth, but he knew absolutely nothing about the drug trade. The culture, the danger, the players, the unwritten rules that keep you alive. Jesse knew all of it. Jesse had been living in that world for years. He knew the streets, knew the dealers, and knew how to move product. He knew who to avoid and who to approach. Without Jesse's knowledge, Walt would have walked into the wrong situation in week 1 and either gotten arrested or killed. And who made it all possible? Well, the man who spent 5 seasons hunting him, Hank. Because if Walter never went on that ride-along, he wouldn't have partnered with Jesse. Jesse introduced Walt to his network, Badger, Combo, Skinny Pete. He taught Walt about pricing, volume, customer expectations, and how the distribution side of the business actually worked. Walt was the superior chemist, but Jesse was his guide and his protection in a world where Walt was dangerously naive. Think about it. A high school chemistry teacher with cancer, trying to navigate the Albuquerque drug scene alone with no contacts and no street knowledge? He wouldn't have lasted a week. Walt was completely blind to how dangerous the world really was. He didn't know the unwritten rules, didn't know which corners were claimed, and he didn't know how to read a situation before it turned violent. Jesse did. Saving Walt from Tuco. This is the clearest, most unambiguous save in the entire series, and it happens in Season 2. When Tuco kidnaps Walt and Jesse and takes them to his Uncle Hector's desert shack, the situation is immediately life-threatening. Tuco is paranoid, violent, and unpredictable. He's already beaten No-Dos to death in front of them for speaking out of turn. Now he's planning to take them to Mexico to cook meth for the cartel forever. Walt's only play is trying to slip the ricin into Tuco's burrito, and he almost pulls it off. But Hector is watching from his wheelchair and rings his bell frantically before Tuco can take a bite. Tuco stops, looks at the food, looks at Walt, and immediately knows something is wrong. Tuco, high on his own product as always, drags Jesse outside with a gun and starts beating him up. Everything's about to end. This is the moment they both die. Walt tries to distract him by talking, and then Jesse grabs a rock and smashes Tuco over the head with it. Walt gets a hold of the rifle, but he doesn't have a clue what to do with it, it looks like. Jesse and Tuco fight on the ground, struggling for control, and Jesse manages to get a hold of Tuco's pistol. He shoots Tuco, wounding him and beating him up, creating enough chaos for him and Walt to get away before Hank arrives and kills Tuco himself. I guess Jesse didn't just save Walt, but also himself. But yeah, this was probably one of the closest encounters they had with death. Dropping the charges against Hank. After Hank beats Jesse badly outside his house, mistakenly blaming him for the fake phone call about Marie, Jesse is hospitalized and has grounds for a serious assault case against a federal agent, with security camera footage to back it up. Walt starts manipulating Jesse to drop the charges and come back to cooking. Jesse agrees. This matters more than it seems. If Jesse had pressed charges, Hank's career would have been derailed or ended entirely. And if Hank had been sidelined from the DEA, he wouldn't have been positioned to kill the cousins or Marco Salamanca during the parking lot ambush, an event Gus orchestrated specifically to neutralize the cousins who were hunting Walt. With Hank out of the picture, the cousins would have remained focused on Walt. They came very close to killing him as it was. If that protection had been removed, the odds of Walt surviving the cousins' pursuit dropped dramatically. Jesse dropping those charges sets off a chain of events that indirectly keep Walt alive. killing Gale Boetticher. This is the most direct save after Tuco. Gus has had enough of Walt. He sends Mike and Victor to pick Walt up, meaning to execute him. Walt has minutes, maybe less. In desperation, he calls Jesse and tells him he has to kill Gale Boetticher. Not because Gale has done anything wrong, but because Gale is the only other person who knows the formula well enough to take over. If Gale is alive, Walt is replaceable. If Gale is dead, Walt is the only cook Gus has. And killing him becomes a costly business decision rather than a clean solution. Jesse doesn't want to do it. Gale is gentle, kind, and completely innocent in all of this. But Walt makes it plain. If Jesse doesn't pull that trigger, Walt dies tonight, and Jesse is probably not far behind.
Closer than we are. You'll have about a 20-minute lead. They've got me at the laundry and they're going to kill me.
Jesse goes to Gale's apartment. Gale answers the door, and he begs for his life. Jesse is visibly falling apart, crying, shaking, and then he shoots him. Gale's murder haunts Jesse for the rest of the series. It's one of the most damaging things Jesse ever does to himself, and it unambiguously saves Walter's life. Mike gets the call mid-execution and has to stand down. Walt stays alive because Jesse killed an innocent man for him. Walt never fully acknowledged what that cost Jesse. He treated it as a problem solved.
You did the only thing that you could. I hope you understand that.
The intel that killed Gus. By the end of season 4, Walt is completely cornered. Gus has already made his intentions clear. Walt is being phased out, and once Jesse no longer needs him, Walt is a dead man. Walter knows it. He tries to plant a car bomb under Gus's vehicle in the hospital parking lot. It fails. Gus somehow senses something is wrong and walks away without ever going near the car. Walt is out of moves, out of time, and completely out of ideas. Then Jesse, while being questioned by Saul about anything that might help Walt, drops something almost casually. Something he witnessed during all those months spent working closely alongside Gus.
Anything for me? I mean, tell me I didn't poke my head up for nothing. Casa Tranquila. Our boy tells me Frank took him there to visit one of the patients, someone Pinkman says you'll definitely remember.
Gus visits Hector Salamanca at the nursing home regularly, and not out of any sense of duty or respect. He goes there specifically to torment him, to sit in front of a broken old man who can't speak, can't stand, and can't do anything but ring a bell, and remind him that everything the Salamancas built is gone.
Now, the Salamanca name dies with you.
That Gus won. It was personal. It was predictable, and Gus couldn't resist it. Saul passes the information to Walt, and Walt immediately understands what it means. He goes to Hector, and here's the thing. Hector Salamanca hates Gus Fring more than he has hated anyone in his entire life. Walt doesn't need to convince him of much. He rigs the wheelchair with a pipe bomb and waits. When Gus walks into that room to do what he always does, rub everything in his face, Hector looks him dead in the eyes and rings the bell. The explosion takes half of Gus Fring's face off. He walks out of the room, straightens his tie, and drops dead. One of the most iconic deaths in television history, and the single biggest threat to Walt's life is gone. The Magnets plan. After Gus's death, the DEA has a laptop from the Superlab in their evidence room. The laptop contains security footage that could potentially identify Walt and others connected to the lab operation. Walt and Mike are stuck. There's no way to steal it from a police evidence room without being caught. Jesse is the one who suggests using an industrial electromagnet mounted in a truck outside the building to remotely destroy the laptop's data.
Yeah, bitch! Magnets! Oh!
It works, though the outcome is more significant than they realize in the moment. The magnet doesn't just wipe the laptop, it also reveals offshore banking accounts hidden in a photo frame that Gus Fring had for his employees, including Mike and his guys. This would eventually lead to Mike and his guys' money being taken by the feds.
And I suppose we could talk about the $2 million in your granddaughter's name.
The final choice, Felina. In the series finale, Walt rigs an automated M60 in the trunk of a car and uses a remote to trigger it at Jack's compound. The gun sweeps the room, Walt tackles Jesse to the ground, shielding him from the fire. Nearly everyone in the room is killed. Walt has been hit. He's bleeding out, dying. He hands Jesse a gun and tells him to do it. Jesse has every reason to. Walt poisoned Brock, let Andrea get executed in front of him, got him enslaved for months by neo-Nazis, let Jane die. Walter destroyed his life at nearly every turn. Jesse looks at him, sees he's already dying, and says,
Then do it yourself.
He drops the gun, walks out, gets in a car, and drives away, screaming and crying. For the first time in years, free. That refusal is the last thing Jesse does for Walt. He doesn't drag it out and doesn't make him suffer beyond what's already happening. Doesn't hand him over to whatever law enforcement is minutes away. He lets Walt die in his lab, surrounded by his equipment, on his own terms. It's the closest thing to mercy Walt gets, and it comes from the person he treated worst. Why it matters. Walt was a monster. He manipulated Jesse systematically, poisoned a child to control him, let Jane die while standing over her, and ultimately handed Jesse over to be enslaved by neo-Nazis when Jesse tried to leave. This relationship was abusive from almost the very beginning, even before Walt fully understood what he was becoming. But the fact remains, Jesse saves Walt's life multiple times over. He murdered Gale Boetticher, an innocent man, because Walt begged him to. Jesse stayed in the business longer than he should have, at enormous personal cost, and that loyalty repeatedly kept Walt protected and operational. Walt repaid all of it with manipulation, betrayal, and ruin. The tragedy of Breaking Bad isn't just Walt's transformation into Heisenberg, it's that Jesse kept saving him anyway. Kept hoping there was something real underneath the manipulation, kept believing Walt had some genuine care for him. The moment Walt admits he watched Jane die, and Jesse finally understands the full truth, that's the moment the audience sees it too. Jesse was never a partner. He was always a resource. Something to be used and discarded. For 5 seasons, Jesse Pinkman saves Walter White's life. Walter White spent those same 5 seasons destroying Jesse Pinkman's. So let me know in the comments, did Jesse saving Walt's life make him partly responsible for everything that followed? Or was he just a good person who got exploited by someone who never deserved him?